We back into the world of angles and equations of them because we've dealt with this and it will be showing up on the final as well. And so I'm more interested here on this top part of figuring out what these things are rather than necessarily writing just a bunch of numbers down. So up here at the top, we have got three types of angles that when we're doing the math of this, it can come in handy to understand what they are. So anybody remember what an acute angle is? Okay, so
like 89.
Yeah, I mean you could write basically any number between 0 and 89 here. Yeah. If you wanted to actually write some measures. But the big thing here is knowing, hey, if it's a little angle, if it's less than 90, it's cute. It's acute. It's small. So we'll get chatting into some of those in a bit. But then we have three obtuse angles. Okay. Those are going to be over 90 degrees. Not 90. Not 90 itself. Because that's the right angle. And so the reason for wanting to understand the language of these a bit isn't necessarily that I'm going to ask you on the final, hey, what's an acute angle, what's an obtuse angle, something more that's a geometry type thing. But understanding that when we're doing the math, if you see a certain type of angle to realize, hey, that's more than a right angle, it's going to be over 90, my answer. Or it's less. It's going to be less than 90 to make sure your answers make sense. So here's where that's also going to lead us into the math part of this. Okay. What's the sum when we add, oh boy, two supplementary angles? So kind of to give you an idea here. So if I had these two angles that I'm making dots with, what would they add up to? If they make a straight line. How many degrees are in a straight line? 180. So if I have two angles and they make a straight line, they're going to add up to, they're going to have a sum of 180 degrees. But if they're complementary, they form a right angle, right? And that's going to be 90 degrees for those two angles. They make the right angle. And so those first two we've done, and this third one we've done some as well. If I have two angles that are vertical, in other words, they're right across from each other and they share that same point, that same angle. So my greens would be vertical and my reds would be vertical. What do we know about their angles if they're right across from each other?
They're same.
They are. So like if I knew that this was 71 degrees, this would be 71 degrees. Or if I knew that this was 109 degrees, this would be 109. So whenever you see angles that are sharing that common point and are straight across from each other, they're going to be equal. They're going to be the same. And so that now gets us into what we actually did for some of these. And I'm going to work through several of these with you on the front. And then we're going to kind of expand our knowledge here, or our ability a little bit. I'm kind of hoping. I'm just going to scooch this a little bit. So here are three really good examples of how these three things work. So let's see here. ABC is complementary, which means these two angles form a right angle. They're 90 degrees. So if they're 90 total, we'll do a little equation here. If I add 50, and yeah, in the mystery angle, I should get 90. And like Landon has been mentioning, which is true, if I look at it from an equation viewpoint, CBD would be 40. Now, if you can just eyeball it, and you're like, well, hey, it's 90 and 90 minus 50 is 40, that's fine. But I just want you to be able to see something. Again, these might be some ones that might be good for the note sheet. Then we see supplementary. If I want to make algebra out of it, I'd take the angle I know,
150.
and my x, and set it equal to 180 because the straight line makes 180 degrees. And I'd minus my 150. And my mystery angle is 30 because 150 plus 30 is 180. And then the last one kind of rolling in that same section, JLK is vertical to MLN. In other words, these two, but they share that common point, so they're the same. So the words tell us a lot. So sometimes you'll just have one angle that's given, you've got one that you're looking for, and you work them that way. However, sometimes, as we kind of flip over a bit here, things can get a little bit stranger. So I get here to the back. As we get ready to head towards number 13 here, yeah, these would be the same as well. Nope, that's why we're not worried about that part. We're only given the one angle here. So as we head to look at like 13 and 14, it's the same idea. I look for keywords supplementary, which means they equal 180, but this time I don't just get numbers, now I'm getting variables too. So here I've got 2x, and I've got this x plus 24, but together these two angles make a straight line. And so what my job is going to be is to do the algebra part now. So we've chatted about this before. If your x's or your numbers are on the same side of the equals, we're combining like terms. Do not do opposites with those. So I get that in. Because here, since there's no number on the outside to distribute, it's not going to change anything. Good question on the parentheses. So, what's my first of two steps now
You have to subtract
to get the x alone? Okay.
Then you have to divide the 3 by 1.
So once we subtract the 24 out, you're right.
It's 52.
going to do the division. We're going to keep doing our opposites. And I can find my x value. Now, there's a way or a time that that may be all that's being asked of you.
Okay.
In this case, it's not, but it may be sometimes. I'm just saying,
You gotta plug in.
if you're just being asked for x, that's what you would find. But in this case, we want to find out what angle ABD is, which is 2 times x. So we're going to do 2 times 52, because we know what x is now. Because ABD was 2x. But DBC, this angle, is x plus 24. So we replace the x with 52. And if I really wanted to check and make sure my answer was right, I would take those two answers and add them up and make sure they equaled 180, and they do. So a little more work here and there, but nothing terrible. Okay, words are important. EFG is complementary to GFH. So once again, I'm going to take the expressions that are in each one of those, add them up to equal 90, and remember, those y's, even though I don't see it initially, both have 1s in front of them. So I'm kind of going to use this to help me see what I should do. So y plus y be 2y. And now I start down the same track I did here, doing opposites to get y by itself. And now it's just a regular old two-step equation to figure out y, and then just like we did on 13, I'm going to plug that number in for y, to get my answer. And then for GFH, that's just y. So just write it down and I'm done. This is going to be more of the world that we are playing in for the final than just having the numbers, but there will be a couple with just the numbers too. I took a peek. So one last one in this area. PRQ, this one, is vertical to, is equal to TRS. Set them equal. And now again, whatever's on the same side with the W. And just take your time doing your opposites until you get to the end. Now this time, I'll be honest, we could almost kind of cheat on this one, because we know these two have to be the same. So to be honest, I know that TRS is going to be 38, but if I wanted to make sure my math was right, I'd come back here again And when I got to the W, I'd replace it with 9. And 45 minus 7 is 38. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro to 16 here. I'm not really worried if you can do something this large. This again is more of a geometry issue. But if you wanted to tackle some of this, you could kind of look and start to see, just for instance, I'm looking here and I'm like, okay, so there's a right angle because I see that square. And I see that this part is 55, but there's this missing part over here. So how would I figure out the missing part? I'd subtract it, yeah. Sure. So 90 minus 55 would be 35, and I could start trying to figure out what some of these other angles are. Because then even I could look and say, well, wait a minute. These all make a straight line. So to figure out this part, I'd add these up. So let's do that quick. Whoops, that ended up being T. I don't know where T came from. Because if I look, let me clean this up. If I take those 4 angles and I add them together, they're making a straight line. So this straight line, as we've seen before, is 180. So if those 3 are 130, this angle is going to be 180 minus 130. And I can just keep playing along. So it's kind of like doing a puzzle when you're trying to find some of the pieces. And we kind of did some of them already, but there's a couple that I left that we could figure out other ways, because there's another straight line. And I could add those up and subtract from 180 to get that other piece. So a little something to think about. I have one more thing I want to mention, and then I want to mention some possibilities for your note sheet, even though we're going to come back to that when we get a little further. When we get on to the second page, remember, sort of like some of the ones you see here and on the last page, yeah, that could definitely show up. I've got these things on my last page, but having them directly on the page that I'm working with never hurts. And so when you're over on this page, just reminding yourself, hey, what type of angle am I looking at? There's 3 I want to do here, and then I think, I gotta peek before I say this. Oh no, 3, and I got one last one on the last page, and then we're good. But I'm looking and I'm going, okay, so like number 2, let's say. Yes. So here, the 2 make a straight angle. So 4x plus 64 equals 180 because they make a straight line. And so I go through and I do my opposites. And again, I don't have to find other angle measures and things. I'm just looking for x, and I'm out. That's what we're looking for on these. So straight line, 180, just like I got here. Vertical angles are equal. So they're apart from each other. I do my one step to get x by itself. And get to my answer. Now, this can get a little funky. You're like, well, what do you mean, like, this can get funky? Like, for instance, I'm not going to do the whole problem, but just to kind of give you some guidance. Number 5. Okay, let's say number 5. This whole angle and this whole angle are the same. So if this one is 63, this is both of those together. It's not just straight equal to like it was up at number 3. So you may have to put a couple pieces together to make the second angle that you're looking for. Or you may get into a dilemma where you look at something like number 7. Now, hey, they're all making a straight line, but there's 3 of them. Don't let that fool you, but x plus 54 plus that other x make a straight angle, so it'd be 180. I'd combine my like terms and I'd solve it. So, again, just trying to get you thinking a little bit here on the setup. One more weird one. 10 looks kind of funky. So you're like, okay, again, here's a straight line. So I got the 180. So I'm like, I got x. I got x plus 10. I got 30, holy moly. And I got that little tiny box right there. How many degrees is that again? That little box? 90. So all 4 of those angles. Sure, if that makes sense to you, you absolutely could. Combine my like terms here. And that's what I've got left to solve. So it gets a... It could be. So mainly here I'm looking, am I looking at a straight line for 180? Am I looking at a right angle with the little box for 90? Or are they straight across from each other? And then I'm just doing a little bit of algebra to boot. So when you're kind of bored out of your mind with dealing with equation after equation after equation, I get it. Even though the practice is good, the repetition makes things stick. The last thing in this packet, which I said, if you need to change it up a little, isn't a terrible idea. On the back, it looks like chaos. It is not chaos. So we're going to begin at the start. And my job here is to look at this first triangle and figure out what the mystery angle is. And so I look and I go, okay, how many degrees are in a triangle? 180. So I take 180 and I'm going to subtract the 25 and 130. So whatever angle I find is the right answer, you put that one and then you move to the next angle. And you're like, okay, so 180 minus 44 plus 38. And you get 98, which is below that. And you keep following, and as long as you keep getting right answers, you will slowly work through the maze until you get to the middle.
So
But-
we're just gonna circle.
So you're going to keep circling and then doing the next problem that goes with it. And then when you get that answer, you're going to go one of these two directions. And keep going until you end up in the middle at the end. There's only one way to get there. So if we screw up in the middle, that can be a little bit of a problem. So try these out again. I've got keys up front. I got to find them. I do have keys online as well too, though. And give these a shot. And tomorrow we will wrap up with our last singular review before we start blending everything together.